Hey, welcome back, boys and girls. Today we are doing differentials. So if you recall from the last video, we have two transmissions that we're combining when two become one. This is our Accord, this is our EP3, and here in the back we have our aftermarket. This is a Wavetrac. Couple of options for aftermarket limited slip diffs. M Factory, which is probably the cheapest. Well, actually, some Chinese thing is probably the cheapest. Then M Factory. The Wavetrac is probably in the middle, still pretty expensive. I actually got a smoking deal on this one. I can't remember exactly where I got it or what I paid for, but I paid like $700 or something like that. Anyway, then another popular option is the Quaife. So we're going to be using that. In order to do that, we need to take the ring gear off of one of these, and I'll get to that in a second. So as you can see, one difference is the EP3, similarly with the RSX, has the ring gear that interfaces with the speed sensor. Honda refers to that as the vehicle speed sensor because it's basically sensing the speed of the axles, although that's not necessarily true of this carrier, which is most of the time when you're driving down the road is the same rotational speed as your axles. The other difference that is not so easy to spot is that because they are different final drive ratios, this ring gear is a little bit smaller than this ring gear. This is, if I remember right, 79 tooth. This is 81. On the countershaft, the EP3 has 18 teeth, whereas the Accord and RSX and a bunch of others have 17 teeth. And it's either 17 teeth or I got that backwards, but whatever, you get the picture. A couple of things to do. We got to swap over from the OEM differential to our aftermarket. We're going to take the ring gear. We're going to take the ring gear because we want to keep our tall final drive ratio as the Accord. We're going to take the ring gear from the Accord diff and plop it onto the aftermarket. Also, then we're going to take off this speed sensor ring gear and use that because we're going to be using the RSX/EP3 case, which uses, and wiring harness and so on, which uses the vehicle speed sensor and not the countershaft speed sensor, which is the configuration that the Accord uses. And also, I'm going to swap the bearings over as well. Probably most people would just buy new bearings and swap instead of swapping them over. You get carried away in like a transmission that's probably got plenty of life left in it. You're going to end up dumping hundreds of dollars. You know, probably if you replace all the replaceable parts, you're spending like $1,000 on a transmission, and it just doesn't seem to me to be money well spent, especially if the bearings are fine. And that's a little bit tricky. I don't know. I mean, these guys, you can kind of, it's especially helpful if you have a couple sitting next to each other and you can feel one versus another. We're going to reuse those bearings. You can tell me you told me so if the transmission makes noise and those bearings burn out in no time at all. So first order of business, we're going to get these bearings off, and we're going to use this puller. It's not, well, it's on its own, it's not a puller, but this I think there's a special name for that. I can't remember. Bearing splitter, that's what it's called. We're going to use that, pop the bearings off, pop this ring off, and then we're going to pop these fasteners off. The important thing to remember is, well, I think it's important to remember because I think I remember it. Well, hopefully I'm not remembering it wrong, is that these are left-hand threads. So we're going to go righty-loosey. Oh, and you'll want to use a soft jaw vise, as you'll see demonstrated in just a moment. Nope, they are not left-hand threads. I lied. Maybe they are on are they on a B series? Why did I think that? Fuck, I don't know. For those of you wondering why I'm taking this ring off of the gear, this ring off of the diff that I'm not going to use this ring, but it's a little bit easier in the press to handle this if the ring is off. As you can see, boys and girls, I'm using a hydraulic press. For that bearing, probably the more appropriate tool would have been an arbor press, but I don't have an arbor press, so hence why we're using a 30-ton hydraulic press. So now we're just pressing this ring off. There we go. Okay, so we got our bearings off. Like I said, they're in pretty good shape, so I'm just gonna use those. Hopefully, as I say that, I'm crossing my fingers. I hope that I don't regret that. In our ring, I'm gonna go right on there. I'm gonna use this guy right here. You can see that fits pretty nice, and we'll use this sort of cup or plate to interface with the press. To anybody who's looking at buying a hydraulic press and various sleeves and adapters and so on, I just basically buy as many of those different kits as I can, and you end up with a bunch of these rings and sleeves and stuff that you can always find the thing you're looking for. I mean, 95% of the things that you have you don't use, but you never know what you're going to need. The bearing splitter, I can't remember how much I got this for. It's, it's an Amazon thing for like, I don't know, 60 or 70 bucks. Yeah, and I find that you can tighten these guys down and it'll really pull that bearing off, but it's not going to pull it all the way off. You really need some kind of press. But anyway, so let's go press this guy on, then we'll press both the bearings on, then we'll bolt on the ring. Okay, so the tricky part here is keeping this thing aligned so that ring doesn't get all wonky. So I think it's about as straight as I can get it. So let's see. We got our bearing on the top side. Okay, boys and girls, so we got our differential together. We got our speed ring on there, our reused bearings, which is maybe not a good idea, but they feel good. They feel fine. So now let's assemble it onto the ring. Again, soft jaws. Used soft jaws and soft jaws only. And if you remember, when I was disassembling, I mentioned that they were left-hand fasteners, and as I tried to loosen them, we found that they were not left-hand fasteners. And then upon checking the book, when I checked the book to get the torque specs on these bolts, the book says that they're left-hand fasteners. Hopefully these threads are the same thread as the fastener. Let's find out. And they appear to be. So looks like we're good. Torque on this is 89 pound-feet or foot-pounds, whichever you prefer. And go in a crisscross pattern like you would on lug nuts. Hey boys and girls, welcome back. So as you can see, we are all apart and we are nearly ready to put this gearbox back together, but there's a couple things we need to do first. As you can see, we have our gear set here. We got a bunch of other bits and bobs over there I'll talk about in a minute or later or maybe. So we have both halves of the gear case. We have the bell housing half and the other half. I don't know what you would call that half. But anyway, I replaced the bearings in here, and when I say replaced, I really mean reused. So this is the EP3 gear case, and if you recall, we're taking the gear set from the Honda Accord transmission and putting it in the EP3 gear case, which is basically the same as the RSX gear case. I think it's indeed the same. Anyway, so these bearings, well, the main shaft bearing, or I guess I should say near the left hand. Anyway, the main shaft bearing is the same as in the Accord, but the one that was in the EP3 wasn't. It just felt kind of crusty, and the one from the Accord transmission felt a little bit better. If you weren't a cheap hack like me, you would just buy a new one, but that one, you know, it felt fine to me. And then I guess, you know, we'll know whose fault it is if that transmission is making whirring noises while I'm idling. But the countershaft roller bearing is different from the EP3 to the Accord. I'm quite sure it's the same, that the Accord and the RSX are the same, and that reason is because the final drive is different. This gear, which interfaces with the ring gear on the final drive on the differential, this gear is a little bit bigger, and therefore this shaft, well, maybe not therefore, but in any case, as it is, this shaft is bigger, so this bearing is bigger. I replaced that. It was also in better shape. I mean, I kind of wanted to record this, but I mean, it's pretty straightforward if you have the right puller tool. This one, you can use like a collet style, and then this because this oil device is kind of a pain in the ass. What I did was I ended up making this puller tool so that I just took these fasteners and ground the heads off, or cut half the heads off and ground them down, and so that they fit in there, and then you can spread them in this sort of slotted plate and tighten them down and yank it out with a slide hammer. It did not work very well, but it worked well enough to use once. I don't know if I'd ever use it again. But anyway, pretty straightforward. So now what we're going to do is start slapping this together. But before we do that, we want to check that that the play in the main shaft is appropriate. So what I mean by that is the main shaft resides between two ball bearings. One here, and then the other one is on the other side of the transmission, which winds up in that bore when the case is all together. And it has a little spring washer. You can sort of barely see it, but the point is it needs to not be allowed to flop around axially very much, or if at all. And what we're going to do is we're going to set it in there. We're going to set the gear set in there, put the case back together. Actually, you probably wouldn't even have to put in the counter shaft, now come to think of it. In any case, we're going to set the main shaft in there, put the case back together, just throw a couple of fasteners in there, and then basically wiggle it or push it back and forth to see how much play there is. You wouldn't really have to do that if you weren't changing any of these bearings, or if you weren't changing well, basically anything in this stack. If you say are only taking apart the gear case to maybe clean things up and swap in a limited slip diff, you're not touching anything else, you wouldn't need to check this. But because I'm taking a gear set from one gear case and putting in a different one, that fit might be just a little bit off. And so what they do from the factory is they have these what are sort of look like snap rings, but they're not really snap rings on account of there not being a snap ring groove in there, and for other reasons. But these are shims. There's actually two stacked in there, and so those shims help set that amount of axial travel of the main shaft. So we're going to slap it together, measure the axial travel. I'm pretty sure, well, I took a quick look while you guys weren't looking, but we're going to take a quick measurement, then we can take it back apart again, put all the bullshit in here, and then put it back together for real. One thing that's important to be mindful of is the location of these, I'm going to call them tabs. They interface with these recesses in the case, and if you're not realizing that, it can really fucking piss you off because it's not going together and you don't know why. Ask me how I know. And we're just going to put in a couple of fasteners. We don't need all of them. I'm just going to use 3. And make sure that these case ends are sitting together nice and flush before you start cranking on these screws. Also on the list of things I chose not to replace were all 3 of the seals. I did not replace all 3 of them, and we're gonna see how bad of an idea that was. I don't know why I like to sit it on wood blocks. Yeah, so something banged into this case and kind of cracked it there. I've told myself that that's not going to be a problem. And I've also told myself that all these nicks and shit are not a problem either. The culprit of which I found to likely be this tab on the throwout bearing broke loose and got flopped around in there. Like I said, we're going to measure how much axial play we have in this guy. The spec says it should only be 3 to 7 thousandths is the range. First thing is just tap that home. I'm probably going to do that a number of times. Then we're going to fit on this puller. You can buy these. I know that there is a Honda tool. I just made this one myself with basically an entire machine shop at my disposal, and this is the best I can do. So the idea here, as you might already be able to tell, is this is just a piece of scrap. So we're clamped onto that spline, and we're going to use this screw to push against this plate. These Noga bases are pretty sweet. I think they're made in Israel and they're reasonably affordable. And if you don't have one, it's probably because you probably don't need one, actually. But you need one for this. So you see where we're situated on there. So unfortunately, or I should say fortunately, I have a really nice dial indicator. Unfortunately, it's in metric, so we'll have to do some calculations. Yeah, we're at about 9,000. The spec range, I believe, is 3 to 7,000. So we're over by 2,000s, and I'm gonna not do anything about it. The main thing is that we have travel, and it's not binding, right? What we don't, the worst thing the thing that you don't want is if you go to move this thing and it doesn't move at all. That means that the main shaft is being squeezed by the 2 case halves, which is what you really want to avoid. Squirt a little. Here. And if I remember. Okay, boys and girls, so now we got everything internally assembled, situated, ready to go. So we're ready to put both of the case halves back together. I want to point out a couple of things that are important to remember. So one, this tray. The function of this tray is really important, so don't forget it. If this sometimes after these have been in and out a couple of times, these little I don't know if you call them tabs or whatever, the bits that stick in the hole get a little bit wallered out, and you can take a piece of like paper towel and wrap it around the peg and stuff it in there and help it better retain itself. Make sure the orientation of these tabs are for lack of a better term, correct, so that this pointy bit, usually I just line this pointy bit up with this bolt hole. However you want to do it, just be mindful of that. And then also be mindful of the reverse gear. So you have a fastener that goes through the case in interfaces with that thread. It doesn't have to be perfect. You can reach it. You can reach it with a pick or something to straighten it out if you need to from the outside. But just remember so that is more or less aligned. Dowel pins. Make sure those guys are in there. There are 1, 2, 3. And I'll talk through it while I'm putting it together, but this is just the trickiest part, I find. And getting everything lined up and settling it on there. Some cases are easier than others. One pointer that I think is helpful is to massage these fork rods as they're going in right to their respective bores. Sometimes they don't line up perfectly, and I've been known to sort of forget about them, and I'm trying to get the case on there, and one or more of those is binding up. So you can reach in there with a pick or preferably something soft and massage it. The other thing, cleaning around the mating flange. Use acetone. Don't use rubbing alcohol. Don't use soap and water. Don't use spit and Kleenex or Calm or whatever other, no bodily fluids whatsoever. Okay, so as you can see, we got a bead going all the way around. I'd rather have too much than too little, right? And then I just go around. If I'm going to use a hammer, I'm going to use a soft face, like this dead blow hammer, and I'm just going to touch it very gently. Don't be whacking on it. And of course, remember to, you hear that click, that was a little bound up. You remember to just massage those shift fork rods. Now we're just at the point where our retaining ring is starting to bump into our bearing, so let's massage this a little bit more, and then we'll spread that ring so that can seat all the way down. So I don't recall exactly what the spec says for the order in which these fasteners are to be torqued, but it's something like right back and forth like that, so that you don't anyway, so you move from the center out. Oh, and of course, make sure your reverse shaft is aligned. Okay, torque specs on these guys are about 20 pound-feet, or I think it's 27 or 28 Newton meters. Torque spec on this guy is 25. What is going on with that? I'll get one click and I'll go for another click and it'll keep turning. What the fuck is going on with that? Hey boys and girls, welcome back. Apologies, I ran out of space on my SD card and I was in the middle of it and I couldn't be bothered. As you can see, I was pretty close to the end anyways, so apologies for that. I know that's it's maybe a disappointment, but there's only probably about 6 of you watching, so it's not exactly a massive disappointment. Anyway, we got it back together. I will mention one thing to be mindful of or careful of is the torque of those the case fasteners. As you could maybe see, I was torquing those to the spec, which if memory serves is 27 Newton meters, and I had a number of them just yield. I wasn't able to get up to the torque, and the bolts would stretch. I took out a couple of them. I'll see if I have any pictures. Is that one? No. Anyway, the bolts would stretch. I still persevered, and because some of them would click and some of them would act normal and other ones would stretch. So I think I've looked up online a typical torque for a grade 8 M8, which is what this is like up to 24 Newton meters. Anyway, the book said, I followed the book, and And the torque wrench, I used a couple different torque wrenches, and they appeared to all be, they were pretty close to each other. If they were off, they weren't off by a whole hell of a lot. Anyway, be careful of that. My advice and my intention moving forward, I'm not going to go even close to that. I'd probably go down to, I don't know, 22 newton meters, 20 newton meters, something like that. Anyway, just something to be mindful of. We got everything back together. Everything looks and feels good. You didn't see me assemble the shifting mechanism, but it's not very complicated. It basically just slips in, and you insert this fastener, or this, it's actually a pin on the end of a fastener. And that's basically it. I probably forgot a couple of bits and doodads of wherever they go, but this guy is ready to go. As you can see, I still gotta figure out what I'm gonna do with this, the clutch slave cylinder. This K-tuned one came with this transmission. I'm not sure if I'm going to use this, or I have another transmission I can pull the OEM hardline off of. Beyond that, we're ready to put the engine and transmission together and put it in the car. I'll see you in the next one. Thank you.